Hello and welcome to this Tales from the Hangar podcast episode chapter with Simon Childs. And in this intro I thought I would clarify some of the things mentioned in our up and coming conversation and give you a bit of background about this channel. I decided to start all this back in July 2023, and the reason was to record stories of various pilots and people associated with Middlezoy Aerodrome in Somerset, England. I always love listening to other people's aviation stories, so I decided to give it a go myself. And with the hope others would enjoy them, even if it's just people that knew us. If anyone else enjoyed them, then brilliant. And to keep it simple, I first went down the audio podcast route. I listen to a lot of podcasts on my travels. Watching two people just talking, I think, can be a bit dull. I also think people are more relaxed and natural without being filmed. And on top of this, I've also recorded some aviation images episodes that go along with some of the audio podcasts. That is where we talk about meaningful photographs and the lives in aviation. So still relaxed, but visual. It was nice getting back to talking to someone, rather than me just rattling on about basically failed old aircraft. But don't worry, more of the old ones will come, but I will be doing the odd podcast in between. Anyway, back to my good friend Simon Childs. We recorded this episode at the Somerset Aeroplane Company in his office on the outskirts of Bridgewater in Somerset. That is a couple of miles from Middlezoy Aerodrome. So sorry about some of the background noises and sounds in the up and coming conversation. It couldn't be avoided in a working environment. So going back to Simon, he is the director of this company along with his dad Paul, and I'll get Paul on sometime as he's had an amazing career in aviation. Paul and Simon are also directors of Middlezoy Aerodrome Limited, along with Dave Linney. The company rents the land it uses but owns an original 1940s Nissan hut and hangar at the site. The Somerset Aerofest that is mentioned is an evolving annual aviation event, and that has been a great success, but it's on hold in 2024 to give us all a break and think of how we can take it on to the next step. And finally, wrapping up this little intro, my involvement has been from the start, running all the social media stuff and the Middlezoy Aerodrome website. And that's not forgetting a close team of various pilots, people and friends who all contribute in a way, any way they can, at the airfield. Links to various things mentioned in this podcast can be found in the description of this episode. So right, let's get on with it with Simon. Hello Simon.
Hello.
Right, we'll start off very formally and then it just goes downhill.
Okay.
Right, and your date and place of birth please.
11th of the 7th, 1990, Bristol.
Local boy then.
Home.
Right, so I'll explain to the listeners, if there's anyone there, where we are. We're currently at your workshop.
We are.
Describe your workshop and what goes on here for the listeners.
Well, it's 3 or 4 units bolted together by some means, full of aeroplanes, engines, parts.
You're going to give away what aircraft you got here, or a couple of them?
So currently we have a Percival Proctor in here. We've got a very interesting Proctor Kittiwake, which was the only aircraft ever built by the Royal Navy. Looks a bit like a small bulldog, really. There's an Isaacs Fury in here, and there's some other work which I can't really disclose. And then there's some personal things, such as a Armstrong Siddeley Cheetah 10 radial engine being built.
A lot of old stuff.
Yeah, it's mainly old stuff. Well, we do aircraft maintenance and restoration work, but at the moment the majority of our work is painting and finishing. But we're not limited to. So
are you an aviation director, entrepreneur, or engineer?
I guess a medley of all of those things, really. To sum up my current position, as you well know, we're involved with the Airfield. I fly aeroplanes, I look after them, I fix them. I wouldn't say I break them, but I'm able to fix them should anything arise.
So we're at the Somerset Aeroplane Company, that's where we are at the
moment. We are indeed,
yeah. And Simon is a director of Middlezoy Aerodrome, and also he's the key man behind Aerofest that we've done successfully, but having a year off this year.
Yeah.
So, right then, so we go back into your childhood. What's your first childhood memory and what got you into aviation? I think I know that your background, obviously, is in your blood. But what do you remember thinking, I like this?
I think my first memory, the first sort of materialistic thing that I can remember was a Airfix model of a Fokker triplane, which Santa very kindly bought me. And I can't quite remember how old I was, but I must maybe 5 or 6. absolutely no idea how I was going to build this thing, but just, completely bowled over by the picture on the front. And, of course, like most children, when you get that sort of thing, it lasts 30 seconds and you lose a piece. And
yeah, well, the pictures on the front were so good, weren't they?
They were back then.
Cross artwork and stuff. I used to love.
And
you set fire to it in the end, anyway.
Say again?
Did you set fire to it in the end?
I don't think I needed to. It was. It didn't look like a triplane. That's all I can say. But that's how it all starts, doesn't it? And then, of course, as the years go on, you get more and more into airfix models, and still interested in that sort of stuff. Balsa wood models, scale models, and it just sort of grows from there. It's infectious, isn't it? Really, I think for a lot of people who are into that sort of thing, you surround yourself with others that are equally as passionate, and then of course.
So, what's your memory of seeing something amazing in the sky then, flying over?
Concorde, I think.
Yeah, that's pretty good, isn't it?
I think like a lot of kids from my generation. Well, actually, when I say from my generation, I think a lot of people in the 80s and early 90s, a good day out was sort of taking a picnic to the end of the runway at Heathrow and watching Concorde fly over. And
did you go to Filton much at all?
No, I didn't actually. Even though we lived in Portishead when I was growing up, so we'd often see things flying out. But no, it wasn't really a thing to do. At Heathrow, I remember my dad taking me up to Heathrow. In fact, I've got it on some old film somewhere.
Good to see.
It's quite funny because I'm now friends with John Beattie, who, for those who know aeroplanes, was heavily involved with the historic flight, and has flown pretty much everything really. Very nice chap. But when I was younger, a video came out in the 90s called Sea Fury. And there's a clip in that where it basically shows the LSO on a flight carrier, on a carrier, of these aeroplanes, Sea Furies, returning back to the deck, and sort of wheels down, hook down, flap down, so and all that
exciting stuff.
Yeah, and I can remember my brother at Heathrow, looking at these airliners and sort of holding up these fake pair of binoculars and wheels down, hook down, So it's all very, it's all silly, but I guess they're fond memories, aren't they? That's how it all starts.
Yeah.
Really.
So going from early days, then we talk about planes, obviously, but what about your jobs up to where you are today? Then, you've done other jobs before.
Yeah.
Did you help your dad do stuff, obviously?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been playing around with aeroplanes ever since I was, the background story, but for the listeners, my grandfather retired as chief design engineer at British Aerospace, and my father also worked there for a stint when he was younger. So aviation has always been in my blood, and they've had things as a kid growing up. They had a Youngman and the Pietenpol, which I currently fly and look after. So I've always been exposed to.
It's always been there, I suppose.
Yeah, it has really. But I have, I've had lots of jobs, different various things, and just I guess gaining life skills. But I always sort of knew that I would come round to working on aeroplanes. That's what I really wanted to do.
Well, we'll explain to people that Simon actually worked for me at Bristol Airport.
I thought I'd leave that bit out, but
we got to mention it. We had an interview at the pub, didn't we?
We did,
which is one of the craziest things ever. But as soon as we started talking about planes, I thought, I like this guy. I don't care what he's like. Really, he's got a job.
Yeah, I think the feeling was mutual. It's quite refreshing to.
Well, yeah. How long was that? 2000? Because the Airfield at Middlezoy started 17ish, and you were at Pitney and learning to fly, weren't you?
Yeah.
When did you work at Airline Services then? That
must have been
15, isn't it?
14, 15.
It's about
16,
nearly 10 years we know each other then.
Yeah. I mean, we had some laughs, didn't we? I mean, that's an episode in itself, just talking about Bristol Airport. But
so when we're meant to be working, we will mention it, because I can't be sacked because the company doesn't exist anymore. We sat there and had an idea for the design and went through the design for the Middlezoy thing, didn't we?
Yeah. And
then it's like, I remember that day saying, what would you really like to do? I said, I'd like to run an airfield, Simon. So up to today then, well, Simon obviously owns the Airfield, but I help do all the social media, Facebook, website and all that stuff. So in a way, we're playing with the train set, aren't we?
Yeah, we are really.
Nice.
And that's that was what it was all about, wasn't it? We set that up to, it was essentially just a group of friends getting together and starting with nothing and ending up with something.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're Yeah, I mean, it's going great, and I wouldn't, I couldn't wish to be doing it with
And
better
obviously
people,
with
really.
Dave, your dad, and Rick and everything, I've made a nice circle of friends, and it's been really enjoyable.
Yeah.
Been stressful at times with certain things, but
Yeah.
it's all rewarding, isn't it, ultimately. For
Overall, I think it's a healthy balance.
I think so.
Yeah.
So, okay, what was your first flight then?
My
Actually, as a passenger, let's go with that one first, shall we?
Yeah, so my first flight...
To Greece or something.
Now, I'm slightly conflicted here because I always thought it was an Aleutian 62 with Air Cubana.
Wow.
However, I seem to remember, again, I was only 5 or 6, I seem to recall it looked more like a TriStar.
Right.
So it's either one of those two.
Oh,
but I remember the service trolley coming out the middle,
That's pretty
being
cool,
absolutely
isn't it?
petrified.
If it was an Aleutian 62, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
VC10, Russian VC10, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
Nice,
it was a
beast.
great holiday, and back then, of course, my dad was. I didn't realise, it's only when I look back on footage, but actually, the reason we went there was because he was hunting for Hawker Seafaring parts. So, yeah, it's definitely in the family. I mean, we're both as mad as each other, really.
That's true, very true. So, what was the first aircraft you actually flew or took the controls off then?
The first aircraft I flew was an Oster. It wasn't an Oster 5. I'd basically gone to it's the airfield up near Sheffield. Anyway, there's a little airfield. Oh, Netherthorpe. I was up there, and my dad and I got up to have a look at, just as you do, scout these little airfields out. And a guy there, Joe, I think his name was, he was tinkering with this Oster, and I said, "Oh, that's nice, pretty little thing." It was in civilian colours, and I said, "Oh, are you off anywhere nice?" And he said, "Oh yeah, just got to take it around for a bit, and check one or two things out." And he said, "Oh, there's a spare seat going if you'd like that." So I jumped in. I actually think I forgot to tell my dad that I was going off, so he left him. And I think in any other circumstances, your parents would be a bit concerned, but I came back to find my dad talking to about 20 people huddled around him, talking about the boat or something else. So
Yeah.
that was the first time that I
Did
flew.
you always want to be a pilot though?
Yeah, I mean, I had ambitions to join the RAF as a young boy. Sadly, had a motorcycle accident just after I left school, which hampered that considerably. And so subsequently went the other way and learnt privately. And actually, I think, well, you know me on a personal note, but I think the balance that I've got now, it's paid off, really. I wouldn't change anything,
Definitely.
really.
So what's the first aircraft type you flew solo then?
The Pietenpol.
Yeah.
So it's basically an American design high wing, what we call a parasol wing. It's a tandem aeroplane, and this particular model was purchased and finished by Dave Silsbury, who is still actually my inspector, which is very nice and fitting for him to still be able to look after the aeroplane with me. And it was the first one, a second one to be built in the UK. It missed out by a few days, and then it won the home build trophy in 1988. The Child's family have had the aeroplane since 1995, 96. And after, well, as you say, around about 2015, I wanted to learn to fly, but I had no desire to learn on modern aeroplanes.
No.
So it was quite difficult to find somebody to instruct me.
But rewarding learning on that sort of aircraft, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like people will move on to that normally, wouldn't they? Learning a Piper or a Cessna or something.
Yeah, I mean, it was it was fantastic. I mean, what an experience to be able to do that and carry on flying it, which is what Middlezoy is all about, isn't it? The aeroplanes we've got there.
Yeah, it looks as good as looks really great condition as well.
Yeah, so really it's a toast to my grandfather, who's sadly no longer with us, and my dad, really. My dad always wanted to fly but never quite got there, so to be able to sort of pick up the mantle and...
Yeah, it's good. So your first solo flight then, what was that like?
First solo was at Eagle Scott Airfield in Devon, in the Peat. It was a summer's evening, around 9 o'clock. Beautiful weather, flat calm. It may be a gentle breeze down the strip. And I'd flown interestingly, my instructor had taken the aeroplane up solo just to see what the difference was going to be with somebody missing out the front. I didn't really put two and two together at that point. I was just more concerned, please put my aeroplane back on the ground safely, which is a bit rich for me as a student, I suppose. Then we went off dual. We threw it around a bit, did a couple of circuits, and then on the last circuit before he got out, he made me taxi back to the top where the clubhouse was, which we never did. We always went to the first intersection, which was about 100 yards or so from the threshold, and again didn't twig. I was sat there, and he basically undid his straps, got out, said one circuit, slapped me on the top of the head, he'll put the kettle on.
Off you go.
So he buckled up the front straps and I taxied off sort of 90 degrees off the strip at the hold. And going back to what you were saying earlier, favourite film and stuff, I just started humming the theme tune to Reach for the Sky. And I thought, oh my goodness me, this propeller's turning in front of me. Suddenly you feel very isolated because no one sat in the front. And I sat there probably for 2 or 3 minutes contemplating, is this really what I want? And but again, it's all nerves. It's nerves in the right direction. That's all it was. I was super keen to fly, of course, and learn. So I lined up, and I just remember opening the power, and the tail came up much quicker than dual, obviously. And the aeroplane leapt into the air and, gracefully sort of flew round. She almost flew herself, to be honest. It was very smooth air. And I just kept, talking to myself, what would Barry be saying now, who was my instructor, and humming the theme tune, And then I sort of got halfway, after the sort of initial shock of being airborne on your own for the first time, I then sort of turned left and flew a left-hand pattern, and when I was downwind, it suddenly dawned on me that I had to get it on the ground again, which was
You didn't do machine gun sounds then?
No, I didn't. I have done since. I've put Dave Linney and a few others in the gun sight on formation flying, but it's quite tricky with the Peak because you're working pretty hard because she's not very fast.
So going back to nice flights, we got some lovely footage on the Middlezoy YouTube and on our Facebook thing. There's been some fantastic footage, and some of those must have been really memorable.
Yeah, the first one was because I hadn't done a huge amount of formation flying, and I'd gone up and practiced with a friend of mine who is an examiner and a good friend, and Dave Linney. We'd done some formation work together. Everybody's super supportive down at Middlezoy. I think that's another thing that's great there, is it's full of wealth and experience, knowledge. Rick is a classic example who you interviewed before. But yeah, I think when you do a fly pass, certainly for remembrance or something significant, it's hard to find the words really.
But that's one of the nicest things that we do, isn't it?
Yeah,
and put something back, and everyone appreciates that. And I think everyone enjoys participating in that.
Yeah, and it makes all the hard work here, the long nights, the working weekends, going home, worrying about things, and all the problem solving that you're having to do. It makes it all worthwhile. Because ultimately for me, I don't fly for myself, and as much as I really enjoy it and I love it, if I can inspire somebody else, who they could be older, they could be, they could be anybody. That's why I get up in the morning and I do what I do, and and if I can, hopefully the service that we offer here is helping somebody somewhere to keep this legacy of flying these wonderful things around. That is why. That's why we do what we do here. That's why we do what we do at Middlezoy, and long may that continue.
Fair enough.
The Moth, I will add in there that flying the Moth, I flew the Moth for the first time on Sunday.
Yeah, well, I haven't spoken to you about that, so I'm curious now.
Yeah.
How you got on?
So I've been flying now since 2017, and the majority of my flying's been done in the Pietenpol. I've flown near Ronker and a couple of other things along the way. And I've flown a Bulldog and a Chipmunk, but the Moth being exposed, low wing, the history behind it, I feel like there's a lot of pressure because it's the only one in the Northern Hemisphere. So to be given the chance to be able to fly it and look after it is amazing. And it's the first time in a long time where I've sat at the end of the runway again, humming the theme tune to Reach for the Sky, thinking, what am I doing here? You know,
what was it like to fly then? It looks perfect to me.
Yeah, it's very elegant. It's an interesting machine. Again, these aeroplanes from the 30s, 20s.
What's the power relation to the Pietenpol like, and difference?
It's similar. It's a slower running engine. So, you know, peak RPM is nowhere near what you would get on a Continental or a Lycoming. But once, you know, getting her in the air, the biggest difference, of course, is its left pedal instead of right to compensate the torque on takeoff. Once she's in the air, still a little bit of left pedal. I think that's the thing you have to get used to, especially if you're jumping in one and then the other. She flies a lot faster, about 80 miles an hour, and of course she's got an air brake, this wonderful perforated flap out the bottom, you know, which is like iconic for those sorts of aeroplanes.
I just think of aircraft carrier when I see those.
Yeah, and
who did you go out with first? Did you go out with Dave first?
No, I just flew it solo. Dave flew it around, and we sort of debriefed. He debriefed, and we wrote some figures down, and you know, he sort of gave me some pointers on what he'd learned on his flight. And
all right,
you know, obviously it changes because I'm slightly heavier than him, and the aeroplane flies slightly differently. But I think the interesting thing, a bit like a Spitfire, you know, you're flying right hand on the stick, left hand on the throttle. Once you're airborne, you then change hands, put the gear up and stuff like that. And the Moth is no different, really. I did a simulated go around, so we set the air brake in the circuit, which is on the right hand, and it's a big lever that you pull up. So for that, you swap hands. So your left hand is then on the stick. You apply the brake, right hand back on the stick, change the pitch, power to compensate. And of course, when you come in to land, if you then balk it and you go around, it's a lot with your hands to, you know, you power on, positive rate of climb, swap hands, gear, air brake up, back on the trim to trim off any pressure, and it's very pitch sensitive and trim sensitive. So, all while putting left pedal in and not right. So, if you know, it's one of those aeroplanes that, you know, you definitely have to sit there and just take a few minutes before you go anywhere, just to remind yourself those differences. But again, you know, bit like the Pietenpol, you land, you get out, you look back at this phenomenal machine that you've just been able to fly, and it's just, you know, it's just amazing. You know, I mean, what a thing to be able to do.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? Really nice aircraft.
Yeah, and you know, as I say, we've got some pretty exotic types at Middlezoy, and hopefully one day we'll get the Provost in the air and we'll fly that. You know, but it's an interesting getting into an aeroplane for the first time is, you know, when you do your solo, of course you sort of, it's the norm, isn't it? I think if you ask most people on their first solo, they all have similar emotions. They're all petrified, always excited. But when you get into an aeroplane for the first time, and when you got your license and you've experienced that, you know, it's a very, very vivid memory of how. And
you must be pretty chuffed with yourself as well.
Yeah, I mean, you always are, aren't you? Right? Even when you're flying stuff that you're used to, you know, any landing you can walk away from is a good one.
Yeah, you mentioned the Pietenpol.
Yeah.
What about the others?
So the projects that we have on at the moment are an Isaacs Fury, which was designed by John Isaacs. He worked for Super Rings. Also built designed and built the Isaacs Spitfire. We've got a Hawker F20 project underway, which is very unique. It's the only example in the world, with a replica with a different engine, but it will be the first time that something of that, the similarity to the original, will have flown since 1930, I believe. We've got a Percival Provost T1. We have a de Havilland Moth Minor, which is the latest aeroplane to join a syndicate between Dave Linney and I.
With an interesting history as well, isn't it?
Very interesting history. It was once a stable hack for John Cat's-Eyes Cunningham. We're not sure exactly the dates on that, but obviously he conducted with Geoffrey de Havilland a lot of the test flying on the Moth Minor.
Geoffrey flew as well, didn't he?
Yeah, they both, in fact, an interesting story, they were both doing spinning trials on the Moth Minor as a type, and got into some difficulty, both had to jump out. So, and then they put spinning strakes on like the Tiger Moth. It's the only airworthy example in the Northern Hemisphere, based at Middlezoy. The other two, I believe, one is in New Zealand, the other is in Australia.
Yeah, it's really good. It's nice.
Yeah, it's cool.
So it's quite a fleet, really. We've got at the aerodrome now, isn't it? Really, it's quite amazing. It's evolving with your aircraft and other people's aircraft.
Yeah, and people, I mean, it's exactly doing what it was set up to do.
So moving on to something different now, Aerofest. We're obviously not doing it this year. And all these things we're mentioning on this conversation, I'll leave links in the description so you can delve deeper into it. So what do you think about Aerofest? It's parked for a bit, but it's been successful, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's again, it started from nothing, as sort of a simple fly-in, which was very popular because Middlezoy was already popular for people to visit. And then we thought that we would tune it up a little bit and turn it into something slightly more diverse.
And actually had an air show last year, which was
I had an air show
stunning.
last year with the help of Navy Wings, which was superb because the aeroplanes that we're displaying are very unique types. For instance, the Swordfish is the only example flying in the world.
So lucky with that.
Seafire is the same. And who knows what the future is going to hold. I think. How does with any show, every year you want to try and improve and build on what you've already created. Obviously, the obvious answer is more aeroplanes and a bigger display. We are sort of subject to or limited to space where we are, and ultimately, at the top of all of that comes cost, doesn't it, and time and and staffing. It was
going up to the next level, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think certainly the mojo hasn't been lost, but it's just we need to reevaluate as a team and figure out what changes can be made to make a big difference at where we are without changing sort of the core location or anything else. So yeah, I mean ultimately it's a great show. It's grassroots. It's got everything really that you would want if you like aeroplanes.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest achievements we've done there. Really, the air shows and fly-ins and stuff are really
we won't
nice, haven't they?
We won't lose sight of that. I think it's we've got plenty in the calendar this year. We'll have plenty in the calendar next year, and we'll just see what the future holds. I mean, we'll look into it and see. Yeah.
Right. So the take two.
You're going to leave that in.
Right, so I can't speak now. Right, for the future, where do you see yourself in a few years' time? What would you like to achieve, and etc.?
I think from a business point of view,
just evolve on, I suppose.
Yeah, we're doing great things here, and we're keeping aeroplanes in the air, which is where they need to be. I'd like to think that the business will move to either, in the ideal world, onto an airfield. Is that a reality? Probably not. So we'll look for bigger premises to expand and hopefully take some younger people on and try and sort of share the techniques and skills of a bygone era so they're not lost. Airfield wise, much the same. Everybody's pretty happy, as I understand it. The dynamic is working. So we continue to go down there and grow and support the aviation world, doing what we're doing, and hopefully have many more years flying these wonderful aeroplanes and looking after them and talking to the public as we already do. That's the plan.
So right, what aircraft have you flown on that really stands out, either as a pilot or actually been on and thought, I want some of that, I want more of that? Can you think of?
I think since meeting my wife, we've done quite a bit of travelling. I was never really a world explorer before, and I have to say, flying on the A380 is just. I'm not really one for airliners, but I think I'm so overwhelmed by the sheer size of it.
I know, it's monstrous.
And don't get me wrong, everything's relative, and when you compare, an A320 part next to it, I mean, it's just unbelievable. But I think having, taken off in sort of plus 35 degree heat in Dubai and, using every ounce of runway that's there and not really climbing anywhere is quite something that...
But when you see them in the air, they look like they're not moving, don't they? That's
yeah, I know.
So
you
scale of it, isn't it?
You look at the seat in front of you and you're doing 400 knots, and you think, great, 450 knots. But I mean, it's just an incredible feat of engineering,
brilliant,
something that size to...
Definitely.
Very graceful for such a big bird. And of course, a very big contrast to what I'm used to flying. I think the flap is probably the same size as the wing of the peak.
It's scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, what's your favourite aviation location then? Could be an airfield or a museum. These are.
I have to say Middlezoy.
Yeah, I
only
suppose so.
Because and solely for the reason that I look back. I'll sit there or I'll fly over the top and come back into land, and again, you highlighted on it earlier, what started out in an office in a cabin at Bristol Airport on a whiteboard turned with friends
and a drawing, obviously, with your dad, isn't it? Which
between sort of a core group of 4 or 5 of us have basically made something from nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm unbelievably proud of everybody's involvement in what we've done, Aerofest, as you say. And it is home, it's sort of, I don't know, when you fly away somewhere and you come back, it sort of warms your heart a little bit.
It's therapeutic to go down there, isn't it, sometimes?
Yeah, and I think...
sunny morning, it's quiet. And
I think if you asked anybody who, owns or operates a little strip somewhere, you get very passionate about it, and, even just jumping on a little ride-on mower and cutting the grass and painting the windows and doing stuff that nobody else sees, but that's the some of the best times I've had at Middlezoy is literally with you, with Dad, with Dave,
just
making a cup of tea and talking about aeroplanes and enjoying a bit of grub.
What about a museum that you like?
I think I would go away from the sort of big commercial museums. I like
the little ones. Yeah.
I like the little quirky ones, and because it's the people that I'm very.
The solar one's one of my favourites. It's great. It's all crammed in there, lots of people to chat to, and it's really personal.
Yeah, and I think experiences like that, especially for the next generation, are built on the people that you meet rather than what you have. Again, one of my another memory that sticks with me is meeting Mark Hanna for the first time. Albeit he was, unbeknown to me, probably about to jump in a Spitfire, but just having a 30-second interaction with him, when you're a small boy and you meet a Spitfire pilot, you think, cool, blimey, this is what it's all about, because all you do as a child is you buy Airfix models and you read books about it. You never think that you're going to meet people like that, and that's why really one of the things that we all advocate at Middlezoy is being very personal and having that personal touch with, especially with the next generation.
Don't you think the aircraft are wonderful and everything, but the people involved,
100%.
Again, that's why I started chatting to people that people listening to this probably don't know them or not really interested, but all these people have got such great stories.
Yeah.
We go back to Rick and Dave and your dad and yourself. I haven't got around to your dad. One day I'll sit and chat to him.
Yeah.
But everybody's got a fantastic story.
Yeah, and I think, again, I refer back to Middlezoy, having what we have there is such a magnet for these interesting people.
Yeah.
Half the people that turn up, you would never meet ordinarily in the street. And I think the thing that, people are reluctant to leave Middlezoy, so I think that is a sign that what you are doing works when people are, they can't get enough. And whether that, as you say, be the people, whether it be the things that you have there. So I think a healthy balance between the two. And going back to your museum, I think that's where quirky museums, small museums, work, because they tend to be run by enthusiasts or ex military personnel or civilian alike, and they're the ones that inspire you, and ultimately all we are, or all I think we are, is custodians of our heritage, aren't we? And it's our duty to try and inspire the next generation, so there's someone always behind.
Ultimately, that's
the pieces.
That's the achievement we've got so far, and the aim, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, exactly.
Don't lose it.
Exactly. Right.
Okay, so this kind of desert island disc kind of thing. So you're on your desert island. You've got a book and a film. What are you gonna have?
Reach for the Sky.
Yeah. which has come up. I think Dave mentioned that, Mike mentioned that in previous chats.
Yeah, Reach for the Sky, the film, and I think book-wise, I quite enjoyed. I mean, does it have to be aviation related?
No, we're
I quite like Animal Farm.
Yeah,
all right. It's quite it's something that we read in school, and it always sort of stuck with me. It was quite the dynamic of the farm is very apt for a lot of situations. I think
It's good, So aviation heroes then.
Dougie Barder. Got to be only because of the film and the things that I was exposed to. I think I did an article for the LAA some time ago in the magazine. I guess my sort of close hero has got to be my granddad. Only because he, when I look back on it now, he was so instrumental in not always sort of picking you up and throwing you into these situations, but when I look back on certain situations, the knowledge and wisdom he had. And
well, again, your dad and yourself have inherited some of his
exactly right.
Powers. But I mean, and that's one thing that your granddad turned ill when I first knew you, and that's a big regret that I never actually got to chat to him and talk to him, because I'm sure it would have been absolutely fascinating.
Well, funny enough, I've got if you look to your left there, there's the structural repair manual for the VC-10, because he was in charge of taking them from what were Gulf Airways and turning them into conversion tankers for the military.
Again, he would have been a great bloke to sit down here and go through.
Incredible! Quite a few episodes.
Again, that's what motivated me going back in July when we were chatting after Airfest, and I thought I'm going to get off my arse and start doing this, and I'm glad I've done it now.
Yeah,
I've got through all these people.
Yeah,
because once it's gone a lot of it.
Yeah, it is.
But photographs are fascinating that people. Have
I've got
given
some phenomenal pictures at home. Some are blurry, of course.
The thing about history and the internet, which makes me want to do this sort of stuff, is all this stuff would be tucked away in a drawer in a box.
Yeah.
And I've just met a guy recently at work whose dad was a swordfish pilot, and he's got all his gear and stuff, which I mentioned to you, which I want to try and get hold of and have a look through, and because it just go in a box. Yeah,
and you're quite right. It gets forgotten and nobody sees it, and that's as I said before, that's what it's all about, isn't it? If you can create something where you can house these things and have a platform where you can share these things, you're onto a good thing.
And all the bad things about the internet you can forget when things like this history about all kinds of is a tribute to all the engineers of the past in aviation and all that, which people forget. And some of the subjects I covered recently have just amazed me. Some of these guys are so forward thinking. What talent we had in this country and around the world in aviation. Okay, this is an odd one. Okay, the best sound in aviation. What you go blind, and what would cheer you up? What engine would cheer you up?
Oh man, that's difficult. Oh gosh.
Should we say? I think everyone would probably say a Merlin going past at full chaff. But is there any other?
I mean, I like the Griffin engine. I think it's.
It is like music, aren't they? Some of them.
They are. I think it's what you associate them to as well, isn't it? But then equally, something full reheat sounds pretty impressive. So. I mean, the Vulcan.
The howl
on the Vulcan is just when you think about nuclear capability. That in itself, just the howl is enough to put the jitters down you. I think
it is funny because it's a visual thing flying, but the sounds that go with it. For me, I got weird ones like a 111 starting up, and all those sort of sounds don't.
Yeah, we've all got quirky sounds.
Really
and of course, the thing is, I often say this to people. It's I really want to fly a Spitfire, and they think, oh, okay, cool. Well, why is that? What a sound! I said, well, it doesn't sound like that when you're sat in it.
Just a racket, isn't it?
And that's the same for a lot of airplanes. And that's why really I like watching. If you're flying around, somebody takes a video, or it's lovely to see because you don't. It almost if you're flying it all the time, and then somebody else flies it, and you're on the ground watching, it's a completely different experience.
Well, that's again me not being a pilot. Maybe if I was younger, I might have been encouraged, but I've always been satisfied just being around it all. Yeah, and that people are saying, "Well, really?" But I do. I love it.
Well, it's intoxicating, isn't it? I mean, you can't help but it's infectious. It's very atmospheric. Yeah.
So right, we're going to sort of conclude now. So this is a real ripped off from Desert Island Discs, and it's quite a good one actually, I think. So for doing this podcast, I'm now going to buy you a private island in a hot location, right? And this includes a nice lodge, a hut and hangar, there you go, and a long runway. I'll also give you all the money, right, to buy or build 3 aircraft. You're only allowed 3. You can take your Pietenpol and everything else with you, but you've got 3 aircraft, say different moods and different. One of those aircraft, however, has got to be one that doesn't exist, and we can build for you. What's your list?
So 3 aeroplanes.
3 airplanes.
One doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And the other 2 can be
whatever you want.
Whatever. For me, Concorde. I love a Concorde, I think.
That's
only because of the work my granddad did and the fact there isn't one flying. So yeah, I think a Concorde, but I need a relatively big, long runway there. Second of all, I have it doesn't exist.
There's so many in there, really.
That is
What about the other one then?
The other one would probably be a Wellington or something.
Wow,
like that.
That's cool.
Again, only
you could carry
because there is.
passengers in
Well,
that,
but
yeah.
there isn't one flying, so I
That's
mean,
right.
you
you could carry passengers in Concorde, Mike. You couldn't go,
Yeah.
couldn't go very many places.
And one that doesn't exist. I don't know. You'll have to come back to me on that. I don't know.
Okay, when we have our next conversation, you can let me know.
I don't know, actually. It's an interesting question.
Oh, I thought you'd have a clear-cut one, but there's so many, isn't there? It's really difficult.
Yeah, it is very hard. I don't know, is the answer.
All right. So anyway, on that, I think we'll conclude this conversation.
Okay.
And thanks for doing it.
That's all
It's
right.
been a long time coming. And thank you very much for listening.
That's
Cheers,
okay.
Simon. Thanks.